welcome back to Drawing and Painting with Bethany. This video is a class recording of a lesson on drawing landscapes or waterscapes in charcoal. In this lesson we explore tone, perspective, atmosphere and various charcoal techniques, including how to layer up charcoal to get really dark darks. What I want to first of all look at is using tone. So here we go, spotlight that screen. So first of all, with tone, basically you're thinking in terms of light and dark. So we see tones in relationship to other tones. You could have a sort of medium grey, and then you could have a dark black in the middle of it, have a white in the middle of it, and it will make that mid-grey look a little bit different depending on what's sitting next to it. So bear that in mind when you're drawing. You're always seeing tones in relationship to the tones that are surrounding them. We're going to focus on the use of tonal contrast a little bit, but at the moment on the screen I've got a tonal scale. So basically you're going from the darkest tone you can make to the very lightest, which is generally the white of your paper, and just sort of seeing how many different shades of grey you can get in the middle of those two. So we've got 10 different tones on this one, but generally sort of around 8, probably good enough. Right, so if you want to make yourself a tonal scale while I am blabbering on, then you feel free to do that because it can be helpful. The next slide over here I've got is tonal key. And basically a tonal key to an artwork is sort of whether it's mostly involving lighter tones or mostly involving darker tones. So we call a high key drawing one that's got mostly the light tones in it, and a low key drawing one that's got mostly the darker tones in it. And that has an influence on the atmosphere of an artwork. So if you've got mostly sort of dark tones, the atmosphere can be quite sort of broody and sort of stormy and sort of, you know, it's a dark and stormy night kind of thing. It's going to be a little bit more dramatic in that sort of sense, whereas a high key drawing is going to give you a sort of light and airy feel. So if you want to get a bit of drama into the drawings today, then I'd definitely play up on that. And you can also play with the same scene and drawing it in different atmospheres, drawing it with a high key, drawing it with a low key, see how you can change it about a bit, which is quite a fun thing to do. Right, so that is pretty much what I want you to focus on is looking at tone, how we're going to use tone. And in relation to that is also atmospheric perspective. So scary word perspective, but I assure you that this is the more fun type of perspective. At least it doesn't involve drawing straight lines. So basically atmospheric perspective, or aerial perspective as it's sometimes called, is the visual effect of light when it's passing through the atmosphere. So as that happens, as light it sort of scatters through the atmosphere, that is how we perceive, well, how we perceive depth perception. So if you've got blue wavelengths, they tend to be shorter, they get scattered more. And then the further away, light is not always going in the same direction. So the light will sort of be bouncing off of all sorts of things. And that has general effects. So if you're looking at far away objects, they will tend to have a bluish hue to them because the short wavelengths, the blue ones, scatter more easily. You will also see that they appear to be tonally lighter generally. They will have less definition or detail. You won't be able to see texture. And there will be very low tonal contrast. So on the diagram, you can see here that we've got 1, 2, up to 5. And on 5, this is the most distant bit of mountain. There is no contrast whatsoever. It's just one single grey. If we go and look at 4, there is a slight little bit of tonal contrast in there, not very much. As we come closer, you can see that there is more tonal contrast. So you can see definition of trees, just about. And as we come forward, then we can see a sort of darker silhouette of a building against a medium grey. So there's more tonal contrast. And as we come right up to more into the foreground, we can see that there is a high tonal contrast between very dark and very light. And the same thing over here, we have not much definition, not much contrast between the two tones. As we come forward, there's more and more contrast. It gets tonally quite dark right in the very front, but you can see that there is more definition there. And so when we come to look at different grayscale landscapes, you can take note of those different things. So in the distance, tonally lighter mountains, not so much contrast. As you come forward to compare this area of contrast, different greys you can see here, to this area of contrast, which is nearer. There's more difference between the lights and darks, and that increases as you come forward. And then you've got this really dark bit right in the foreground, which makes it stand out. It looks like it's much closer to us. So you can see how that is happening naturally when you look at a landscape, when you photograph that. And if you translate that into your drawings and your paintings, then it makes sense in terms of depth. So here we go. We've got other photographs where you can see, again, high contrast right in the front really creates that sense that this is in the front, this is standing out to you. Whereas as you get further back, there is in this one quite a bit of contrast still, but it's not as dramatic as what's going on in the foreground. We've also got a bit of weather effect and drama with the mist going through. So you can play with all sorts of effects like that, but it's mostly very strong dark against very strong light is going to create depth and atmosphere and bit of drama. Right, so this is the first drawing that we're going to have a look at. And let me just go to there. Okay. So first thing is any paper, cartridge paper, sketchbook paper is absolutely fine for this. For later on, you might, if you've got it, want to have a slightly more sort of heavyweight paper. And some sort of fixative. Now, what I would recommend is if you've got the smelly fixatives, have a window open, or very quickly sort of just go outside and spray with that. Because what I want to do with the second drawing, not this one, is to sort of feel like we're building up a little bit more depth to it. So if possible, that's the plan. I'll give you warning now. And then we've got different sorts of charcoal that you can use. Sorry, was there a question before I go on? Thought I heard someone start to talk. No? Okay. Right, so willow charcoal is what we're mainly going to use. that is the natural sort that has sort of the core through the middle. You get the little sticks that are a little bit bumpy, and sort of you can see the natural wood graining areas. So make sure that you've got the willow charcoal. If you're not sure, just check whether you can rub it out easily or not. If you want to, later on, you could use compressed charcoal. So that's the one that's charcoal powder, that's got a binder, a sort of glue binder in it. And it's much more dense, much more difficult to rub out. So I'm not going to use that at the moment. If you want to use charcoal pencils, then you can do, but for this first exercise, a stick is going to be much easier, because the challenge is draw this landscape without using lines. So you're only drawing shape, and I would say I recommend to do that using the side of a stick. So if you have a little one like that you will just snap a little bit off, that's going to be the most easy way to approach this. I also have the putty rubbers on standby, so just a little bit pulled out. Don't use the whole putty rubber. I've got a slightly cleaner bit because this bit has got an awful lot of charcoal in it already. So just a little bit of that as well. Right, so with this landscape then, what I would have a look at is just sort of planning some outside edges where these, first of all, nearer mountains are going to be. You could start furthest away and then work your way forwards, but I think to get everything in the right place, it's going to be easier to start off with, let me just bring paper reference there, this one here, and then we can carry on and we can go up this side there, and then we can go in behind and fill in the gap. Okay, so put your bit of charcoal on the side. Don't spend too long on this particular drawing. It's just a bit of a warm up to get you thinking in terms of lights and darks.
Oh. Why have you gone right up to the top? That's not on mine that I printed out. Yeah, mine starts here.
I'm starting off the edge actually, aren't I?
Yeah, which confused me.
If you want, because it's a long scene, actually, what you could do is you can just draw yourself a line to start with. So you're at the same ratio. I'm trying to translate it. Good spot that. I'm trying to translate something that isn't there. Wrong ratio. So let's go back down into here and start off there. This is a great thing about charcoal. You can just rub it out very, very easily. I think I need another bit. That's going in funny angles. So, as much as possible, try and use the whole side of your bit of charcoal. You can go back up to these edges and sort of maneuver the stick on its side so that you can create a little bit more of what's going on right at this edge here. And you just pull it all down. So have a look at how at the edges, I'm putting a little bit more pressure. And then as I pull it down, then I'm just lightening up slightly. That gives me the option of going over and darkening as much as I need to, but not making it too dark. And I can always go back over in the foreground and darken up what's happening in front here. So I'm just thinking in terms of shapes and in terms of light and dark. If you can at the same time, think about the sorts of textures along edges that you're seeing, you can do that, but you can just go in with the big shapes first and then go back to the little fiddly details later. It doesn't matter. So there's a bit of land here that's just marginally darker. Pull that bit down there. And then that's about where I'm going to have some of those dark trees. So you can work your way backwards and then you can work your way forwards from there in the same manner. Have a look at how sort of misty, we've not got much definition at all what's going on down here. You can see right at the very tops, it's quite a sharp line still. But as we come down, things become a little bit more misty and unclear. So you can use a little bit of blending. I'm just using my finger at the moment. Just so I can pull that down. You don't have to blend if you don't want to. You can just keep it as is. Sometimes it's nice though to have a bit of contrast in terms of the texture. So if your paper's picking up a lot of texture, I mean your charcoal's picking up lots of texture from the paper, then it's sometimes works quite well for landscapes, but sometimes you might want to have a bit of a softer look. Okay, and then for these very distant areas, you might find it a bit of a struggle to get light enough with the pressure of the charcoal stick. So if you've got a bit of putty rubber, you don't necessarily need to use it to rub out with, but you can use it to soften and blend, particularly if it's a bit of putty rubber that's already full up of charcoal. Works very well. So I get that really nice and light. And don't forget the sky. Have a look at the tone of the sky as well. And this is something that I think you will want to blend. You won't want too much texture going on in your sky generally. If you wanted to put in a little bit of a different weather effect, this is also where you could do that. You see how if you just smooth that down into a mountain, you can create bits of rain over the top there. Very easily done. So you can play around with the reference. You don't have to stick to exactly what's going on there. Okay, so these trees, I'm just blocking in a nice dark mass to go at the base of them. And then I'm just going to use the side of the stick and sort of pull it up. To start with. And then what I'll do is sort of give the tops a little bit of a wiggle. Okay, I don't want to do too much detail in there. This is just to get you going, just a bit of a warm up. So let's come down into the water. And again, have a look. Where is the lightest areas? Where's the darkest areas? We've got a bit of a dark reflection here, but there is a tiny bit of light just at that shoreline, maybe little bits of light in between. If you can work your way around them, so you're leaving the white of the paper, then do aim to do that, but don't panic if you lose them, because you can use the putty rubber to pull them out again. And over here, we've got high contrast, very light against very dark. So see whether you can, whoops, not squeak the charcoal, whether you can get some nice dark lines intermixed with some pure white paper. And as I come into the middle, I'm going to just lighten those lines a little bit when we're having much more light coming through. I also, just to finish it off, going to look up into this mountain. It's a little bit nearer, and there's some snow or something just at the top here. I can see light little shapes that I can go back and put in with the putty rubber, so that it's not white paper that you're getting, it's sort of still grayish coloured. We don't want to go and put in high contrast up there, but you just want a little bit. And maybe have a look in between the trees. If that is looking a little bit sort of too dark, maybe see if you can pull out a little bit just at the base of this mountain here. Have a look at the overall thing. Think about, right, are the darkest darks in the correct places? Are the lightest color, tones in the correct places? Is it working? Does it look like the foreground is the foreground and the background's the background? That's what the main thing. If your mountains aren't the same shapes exactly, I'm not bothered about that. It's more the sense of distance. So you can see you can sort of modify areas if you need to. So I can just knock that bit a little bit further back by taking a bit of the charcoal off just with my thumb there, and then go over with more charcoal on this near bank and make that a little bit more dark and dense. Okay, so what we'll have a look at now is the second of the references. So first of all, I won't go around and spotlight everyone, but if you want to hold up what you've managed to do for that first one, we'll just get a little look at how light and dark you've gone. Nice, nice, okay. Very good. I think that's looking good, Lois, as well. Yeah, yeah. Oh, Helen's is good. I like that.
I tried it out yesterday just to get used to the charcoals again.
Good. Yeah, so have a look at what you've done. And some of you, I think, could go darker in the foreground. Some of you could go a bit lighter in the background. And it's just getting that whole range put in. You're doing well for that first one. I like it. But maybe see whether you can extend the amount of light to dark contrast that you've got over the whole picture. And a way that you can do that with charcoal is by layering up. So the next one that we're going to do, if you do have a slightly thicker paper, you may find it's useful. I've stuck a bit of paper down on the board because the problem I find is when I use this fixative, because it's the liquidy one, it does make the paper buckle. So I'm hoping, I haven't tested it yet, but I'm hoping that having it stuck down will solve that problem for me. So what we're going to do.
Bethany, sorry to interrupt. Hello everybody, sorry I didn't have any volume at the beginning. Happy New Year. I've got mixed media paper. Will that do for this next? It's a bit thicker. It's either that or sketch.
Mixed media paper is great. Yeah, that will do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the next one we're going to have a look at is this lake with the trees, and I've chosen this one because again high contrast, and we've got very dense black to put in the foreground and in this tree line and in the water a little bit there. So to get that dense black with the willow charcoal, the only way you're going to achieve that is by layering up. And because with the fixative, you're going to have to wait for it to dry in between. I've also got a third picture, which is going to be this one. So once we get to a stage with the second picture where it needs to dry off, then we'll come and start with this one, okay? So I'm sorry it's a bit backwards and forwards, but there's nothing worse than just staring at painting or a picture, waiting for it to dry, okay?
Bethany, I haven't finished my first one, so I can't put fixative on it. So is that okay?
Okay, the first one was a warm-up, so I'm not too worried about that one.
Okay. I've missed the whole term, so.
Oh. Yeah, I'm making you work hard the first lesson.
Do as good.
So, okay, this second reference then, the lake. Let's have a look. You can draw lines now. So if you want to sort of measure and plot out where everything's going a little bit more, you are welcome to do that. And actually, I'm going to do that. I'm going to sort of cheat a little bit. I'm going to just draw some lines along here so I can get exactly where I want to have some of these tree lines coming in. So that's the top of the bushes or trees or whatever they are in the distance. This is the edge of the water going across, and that is where those trees in the water, it looks like, are going to be that sort of area of dark, sort of around about here. Okay. So I'm just plotting roughly where I want things to be. I'm just leaving a little gap there because that's where the sun is reflected in the water. So little light patch. And just above that, there's a little bit of tree sticking up. Again, I'll go quite light there. And again, you don't have to plot exactly every tree exactly where it is. That's not entirely the point of this. If you're drawing a reference of a particular place, then you might want to do that. But for this, it's more there for inspiration, and you can move things about if you want to. And we can have, this is where these taller trees are going to be sort of, let's have a bit of a trunk sticking up there, and then it's going to be a kind of shape around a bit like that. So I'm just sort of dotting and dashing and getting a feel for where everything is going. And that means that I can then go and sort of put in the tones and block in later on. So this is, let's come down, this is this sort of patch of lighter water, and then there's a patch of darker water, and then there's the trees in the dark section over here. I want to think, okay, how far forwards? There's sort of ripples across where this very light patch is. And then I know I want to come out in a kind of triangle of dark up here. There's going to be reflections of branches going all the way up here, but where does that dark then come round? Sort of like a bit of a circle almost. Let's, I think I can be a bit generous with it. Let's go all the way around and sort of somewhere around there. Dark is section up in here, darkest section down there. Right, so that's me sort of plotting. I hope that kind of makes sense to you. And me rambling while I'm doing it, so it gives you a little bit of a clue into my thoughts as I'm drawing there. What I want to do from that point on is start blocking in, and again thinking what sort of tones I'm seeing in each place. So let's start as we normally would with a landscape, up in the sky, and then work our way forwards. So we've got a little bit of cloud cover, which if you've got a slightly more textured paper, so I'm thinking the mixed media papers and some of the thicker papers have a bit more texture to them. You may want to think of different ways of applying your charcoal to make it softer. So you could sort of powder it down a little bit and apply it in bits of powder. You could try and, that didn't work. Also use a blending stump to sort of soften it in. So that's just me putting a little bit of dust over, give you an idea. This paper is actually, I thought it was going to be more textured than it is. It's not got that much texture, so I'm not having too much of a problem with just putting it straight on. But if you just start off lightly and then build it up, you can then create a nice sort of soft feeling. So we don't want too much dark in the sky, but I do want to have that sort of cloud, hint of a cloud coming through, and then we've got light bits of sky sort of shining through those in a kind of interesting pattern there. And here again, just a little hint that it's not completely light. And this area here is just sort of off white, I would say. And then I'm going to leave pure white up where the sun is shining. Okay, and then work our way forwards again. So I'm actually going to put in this block of dark for these trees, and then I'm going to think about the texture afterwards. You see how much pressure I'm putting on the charcoal. It's breaking up into lots of little bits. Let's get a bigger, slightly thicker bit of stick there. Over again. Okay, now we can have a little bit of play with mark making at this point. So have a look at these trees and at the edges and just have a bit of a play with sort of twisting, dotting, dashing to create a bit of a more sort of textural edge that's going to describe bits of tree or foliage. So I do this kind of little twisty motion. I'm not sure how well it comes across on screen to see what I'm doing. And I couldn't really describe it apart from a sort of loose twisting. So my fingers are just doing this as I'm drawing. And I find that that gives me a mark that I couldn't really draw just normally, but it gives that kind of texture that I'm after, and it will leave little white gaps occasionally, which at the edge of trees you're going to find that there's sort of gaps through with the white shining through. So you want, if possible, to have some of that going on. Okay, and then up here we've got an awful lot more bare branch and light of the sky coming through. So I'm just going to change the way I'm holding it. So I'm not holding it flat on the paper, I'm holding it upright a little bit more. And it's more linear, but I can still sort of do a little bit of a twist or vary whether I'm pushing down on the paper a lot or a little bit, so that it's sort of dragged lightly across, and I just get, again, a bit of a hit and miss line, not entirely controlled, not very much controlled at all sometimes, but it just gives me a little bit more of an interesting kind of line or mark. And you can always go back into that, darken up some areas. So you might want to have a branch that's a little bit thicker or darker. You can darken the trunk of this big tree. There might be a patch over here that's a bit more dense. Make sure that the edge between this sort of more feathered out bit of tree to the very dense bit below is not too sudden. There should be a little bit more of a gradual change between the two. So you can go back down and you can do some more of this sort of texture along that edge if you need to. Remember to sort of vary the direction of these lines. So think about each individual tree here. Where are the branches going? What direction are they going in? So I'm just trying to tidy up this line. I want a little bit more of a sudden change between very dark and very light water. Again, putty rubber is your friend here. You need to sort of pull your paper around to a different angle. Don't be afraid to do that. Try not to smudge anything that you've already drawn. Okay, everyone all right with that so far? Good, good. Okay, so we'll carry on down from there. This patch of water, it's a bit of a little stripe, is actually reasonably dark on this one side. So I still want to have some contrast between tree, bank and water, but just have a look for yourselves, try and judge how dark do you need to go between the two. Right at the very corners, probably there isn't really much difference at all. But as you come across, then you can see more of a change tone. And I'm not going to smooth this bit in. I'm going to leave a kind of speckledy look to the edge there. Because again, I want to have the feeling of water, light on water. So I'm going to introduce a few sort of light and dark bits. Drawn in as well. If you've got textured paper, just use the texture of the paper. There we go. And then this is going to stay nice and light. I might just have a few teeny little speckles. And then on the other side here, I don't want it to go as dark, but I do want to have a bit of tone put in here. Again, use texture of the paper if you can, or just try and introduce short lines. In front of that, there we have quite a dark patch again. So compare. How dark is this area? How dark is this area? How dark is this area? You're always comparing the tones against the tone surrounding. I'm going to see whether I can keep a little patch of light somewhere in here. If you do draw over the whole thing, you can use the putty rubber to go back and rub out some lighter speckles within this dark mass. So have a look at the shapes. Don't do too much in one go, because there are quite a few sort of different shades of grey, and as I said, little white speckles here and there. that are creating nice, interesting patterns. And it's going to be a good idea if you can to try and keep that. Don't panic too much if it's not looking good, because you can go and rub things out. So I'm looking at keeping lots of horizontal strokes, working my way around the shapes that I started off by drawing. So I'm working in towards the middle where I want to have a little bit of a light still kept, but there are some dark all the way up. There's just a little bit more space between them in some places. Again, you don't have to follow exactly what you're seeing on the photograph. I know I'm not. I'm just taking that as inspiration. And if the spaces of light and dark move around a little bit, that's not a problem. As long as it's got the same feel to it. Okay, so now that I've come down into this front section, have a look at how much pure white you can see and how much is of off-white and how much is grey. And there is a lot more grey than you might have first thought. So what I want to do is keep this area of pure white in the middle here. And then what I want, I'll just leave the putty rubber sitting there. And then what I want is to have off-white mainly surrounding it. So I'm just using my dirty finger. Again, a paper stump will do that as well. That's just giving a little hint of grey there, and then I can go in and I think, okay, there's a patch of light grey in here, patch of light grey somewhere around there, and it's all quite smooth, so you can do a lot of blending in. Try and keep all of the marks you're making as horizontal as possible. And if you can give them a little bit of a pointed edge to each mark, so it's almost like an elongated leaf shape, then that will help with the idea that this is water with little soft ripples on it. Okay, so if you've got that sort of soft light greys. Then what we can do is to work over the top of that, bringing down the darker tones over the top. So have a look at the shapes that you can see. So this tree is reflected probably all the way down to around, where is it, about here. And we've got a kind of, it almost looks like a fish shape, vaguely. Something like that. And then have a go. See, that goes all the way across. Again, it's focuses in on looking at shape and looking at tone. There's probably a few more mid-grey marks through here that can be blended in a bit. And that will bring us down to where we've got this very dark foreground. Right, so let's come back around. This again, it's all going to be filled in eventually. We'll come up into this area and do the same thing. So we're thinking about, ignore the trees and at the moment, but just have a look at the ripples. And I just want to darken along this edge. Okay, so we've got this shape coming in, meeting in the middle. Then we've got some areas that are possibly just a little bit lighter than they are currently through here. So I'm going to use the putty rubber and just lift a little bit. Again, it's all about relationship between which is the darkest mark. And at the moment, we haven't got the darkest marks on because they are the trees and the reflections. So a little bit lighter there, but then I want to go in and put in a few key places that I can think about going back to. So there's not much to do, I don't think, here. Maybe we could go in just around. That looks pretty good. Going into there, that looks all right. So just, I think let's fill in a bit more of the base here so we know exactly where we're going. How far down we're going with those reflections when we put them in. And I want a soft transition. So blending in between. But remember, if you're blending, you're probably taking off some of that charcoal. So it's not going to be quite as dark as you may be able to achieve if you can go over with it a second layer. It's still probably not going to be that dark. We'll just leave it there. And then what we'll need to do is to put some fixative on for it to go any darker there. So before we do that, let's get these branches in. The tricky bit. Everyone ready for the tricky bit? Mixed response, I think, there. Right, so let's have a look. First of all, across this patch of white, you should be able to see a little bit more clearly some of the shapes and the gaps between. So that gives us a clue about where we're going. You don't have to include every single branch if you don't want to. Okay, it might get a bit confusing. So if you want to simplify, feel free. But if we just get a bit of an idea about maybe that many sort of marks going across, and then we can carry them upwards and we can carry them downwards and we can think about reflection. But it gives us a starting point and it's quite clear to see against that stripe of white or very, very light color. Right, so let's have a go at carrying on this branch up. And one goes. So remember, just do as many as you want. You can always add more later on if you decide you want to overcomplicate it. But just get some main branches down first. I think this one, again, it's got a bit of a curve on it. So if you can try and sort of vary how wide some of the branches are. So the trunks are going to be a bit wider. And then you can add in some smaller branches as you go along. This one's a thick one. Okay, now what I want to do over here, again, this is where the sun is shining down. So up in about here, I want to get rid of some branches. Well, not really get rid of them, but ghost them away so that they're hardly there. And we can put the sun in that way. So we've got a little patch of light. And actually, the more branches you have going up and then disappearing and then coming back, the better that effect is going to look. So I'm just going to add a few more actually around there so that we really get a feel for that. And just carry on going with more odd bits of branch, lots of little twigs going off all across. Again, you could do the twisting method, especially over in this corner where there's so much going on. Go just a bit of a random effect. And let's go back to the sun and just really lighten up over the top of where I put those new ones in. Okay, so once you've got what's going on up here, then it's a case of following those marks through into the reflections. And where possible, try and do that by doing lots of little horizontal marks. Rather than drawing a line going down like that, what I'm doing is I'm drawing that line through lots of little dashes. Some of those dashes can be joined up. Some of them might be a little bit more spaced apart. The further you get from the reflected item, the more broken up normally it's going to appear. And where we come over this patch of white Again, try and break up the reflection maybe a little bit more. You don't need to try and draw the reflection of every single small branch, but just get the main trunks in. And again, maybe just a few more ripples or random marks will imply that there's more going on in the reflection, but you don't need to sort of try and put in every single little tweak that you've drawn. Okay, so at that point, it might look like it's pretty good in terms of lights and darks, but you might want to go even darker. And that is why I'm now going to say you want to fix that drawing and leave it to the side, and then we'll come back to it and do another layer over the fixed charcoal. So if you need to take it outside to spray it, feel free to do that. If you've got a little bit more of a non-smelly spray, you can just go over it as I've done here. Open a window if you need to.
Bethany,
Yes.
I've not finished.
Hurry up. Sorry. Don't panic. Don't panic at all. Just get it so that you've got mostly the darks put down. If you can't do all the branches and trees, don't worry about that because you can come back to those.
Okay.
Right, so I'll just put charcoal absolutely everywhere. So what we'll do next is have a look at this third landscape while we're waiting for it to dry. We may not finish the third landscape within the lesson, but we'll see what we can do with that. So we have another bit of paper.
Can you take the little one out so we can see the big one?
Yeah, I'm just going to change it on screen as well. Is that all right? As I don't think the printout shows very well on the screen comparison. Where is it gone? Okay. So this landscape, it's a little bit small, isn't it? Okay, I'll do without, and then I'll see if I can pull this across a bit.
I think that's better. Looks better.
Okay.
I'll run out of charcoal.
Oh no. Okay, so let's have a look again at plotting where things are going. And so what we need to do is sort of work out where we want to have this bit of mountain coming forwards. Where is the waterfall going to begin? This little bit of distant land, trees there, where the rock needs to go, and then we'll stick the trees on top. So let's have a look at, let's put the page up there. Where are we on screen? Let's come in here. Okay, so I know where I'm going off screen. There we go. Let's do something within that. Right. So I want to have my bit of mountain sort of going from there to there. And I'm just sort of very roughly locking in at the moment. So that's going to be bits of tree that side. That's going to be bits of tree this side. So we've got very roughly. And then a bit of a tree line or land or something over here. That's then the beginning of the waterfall. And we can put the rocks, foreground rocks over the top of that. So we want to have the rock beginning just up into not quite the middle of this bit of tree line or whatever it is. And then it can come right down into about here where there's a little triangular kind of pointy bit. Got another bit of boulder sitting on top of that. It's kind of sort of rounded shape and it's quite big. So that will then come down into that extra little bit of supporting rock below. So we've got that kind of shape going on. So these are nice sort of rounded things. And then there's a tree actually that comes from about here all the way down. So I'm just simplifying the tree at the moment to the trunk. It's just a line. Okay, so we've got then, where does that tree go? We've got a tree that comes from here up through there and it comes up into the sky, probably about there. But I'm not going to go too much into the sky yet because I haven't put the charcoal on the sky yet. So just thinking about where it will be going at the moment. And we've got another tree coming through here. There's some small ones doing something over there. On the other side then, it's all very misty, which is lovely, but it doesn't help with plotting where things are going. So let's have a look. We don't want this bit of tree line to go out too far. I think I've got that a bit exaggerated. This is going to be all misty stuff. We've got a bit of misty tree coming through here, bit of taller tree there. I think this is where I point of going, oh, let's do some happy little trees. That's a happy little tree over here. It's one of those kind of pictures, isn't it? Bob Ross. And then let's have a slightly taller one there. Let's go in and put another one somewhere around here. And then we can go again a bit taller. So these ones coming up into the sky. How high is it in relation to the one over here? It's just a teeny bit shorter. So it'll be coming out into there, and then we'll have some taller ones. So there's a few there, and then a taller one there, and then the one that goes off the edge somewhere around here. Right, so those trees go all the way down. These ones come in about here. Those ones just that tall, that one can come a bit lower, Right. We've got lots of lines. It's a good start. Let's have a look at the bit of land that these trees are actually sitting on. That might be helpful. So again, it's all very misty, but we can make out some of the shapes that are going on here. So we've got a nice bit of boulder sitting in the way of the water, about there. All of this is all sort of mid-grey through here. There's something else that's a little bit darker about there. But then we've got this slightly darker piece of rock that comes in through here, comes through about there. Again, there's a slightly rounded boulder at the base that's a bit lighter, I think. Was that just water? Can't tell now. I think that might just be actually some of it's water. Anyway, let's go in and put that in. Need the color version back. Okay, so let's have a look then from that sort of plotted in version of what's going on, which is quite rough. What I want to do again is to play around with different sorts of ways of applying the charcoal. So again, with the sky, we probably want this to be a little bit more blended. So I'm just going to put some grey at the top there and then bring it down. If you have a bit of cloth, you can also use that to do your blending with as well as the finger. And then what I'm going to do is use the putty rubber to pull out the clouds. So drawing negatively with the putty rubber, going to draw in the whiter or lighter shapes. And if you want to enhance any of those clouds or give them a little bit more body, you can either go in with a bit more charcoal into the inside of them and sort of separate the shapes out a bit more, or sometimes work around the edge a teeny bit. Don't go too dark though, I think that's gone a bit too dark, so I'm just going to go and lighten slightly. Okay, so coming forwards again, we want light grey mountain. So remember, this is distant. There's not going to be much contrast, but there may be a little bit. So if you can have a close look at that, there are a few little bits of light sticking up where there's little bits of snow. And then there is a bit of a ridge that's visible somewhere around here. Again, it's very, very fuzzy, but you can just about make out that there is a slight difference in tone. So don't overdo it, but you could have a little bit of that put in. See whether you can get a nice sort of textural edge to the mountain as well. So again, trying to do that without going in too dark is quite difficult. So you may need to go over with the putty rubber and lighten your outside line. And then what I'll do is I'll come down into this little patch here, which is again a bit darker. But then I still want it slightly blended. And it just sort of fades away. So we've got a bit of sfumato fading like the mist. And it is literally mist. Again, putty rubber is great because you can lighten any areas that need it. And I might use that to just put a few lighter trees in that area as well. And then a little bit of mark making up the top. Give it a slightly more tree-like texture. So then we have this area of water. Again, very light, but there might be just a hint of a shadow in there. Very light grey, bit of boulder, but again, it's a slightly nearer, so you might see that there are some more sort of shadowy type shapes to the sides. But I'm keeping it all very soft, very blended. And I'm actually just going to smudge that down because where these trees go over, it's all creating a little bit of a misty shadow. That's actually what I've just done is pretty much dark enough, and just a little bit more there. Come through here, soft blended edges and lots of pulled down smudgy marks. Very descriptive, isn't it? Right. I can put a little bit of the putty rubber back into it to break up some of those marks as well. Make sure you don't leave too many hard lines though. So what I'm looking for now is to get a bit of definition on this one side. So this is our nearest piece of land over here, and therefore that's where some of the darkest areas are going to be. So if I squint my eyes at the reference, what I'm looking for are dark shapes. That's pretty much what I'm drawing now. I'm not really thinking about what those shapes are, but I'm just thinking where the edges of the most dark shapes I can see are. And this central sort of dark shape is quite interesting. It's a bit circle there, goes round. And of course, this is the tree that it's up against, which is a bit of an interesting edge, but I'm not going to fiddle overly with that, just give a hint of what's going on. The other side of that tree, you've also got another dark shape. And it's almost sort of going around a smaller tree that's over on this side as well. Let's go back over into this boulder. So we've got something there, something there. I'm just thinking about the edges before I then go and create that darker edge over here. And actually on that edge, there's a bit of reflected light up from the water, so it's not as dark right underneath here as you think it should be. So we want very dark in this bit, a little bit lighter along that edge, and then very dark down here. there's a little bit of a bush or something there, and it kind of joins into this shape, but there is a bit of a U shape or something up here. There. Again, you can do the similar sort of thing over the other side. But don't go quite as dark. So the darkest bit over the side, it's kind of, again, in the middle back here. It's so the crag in between two rock faces there. Then there's another shape of dark somewhere around here. And down at the base. Oh, we could do some bits of mark making into this little section here. Got little soft marks. Okay, so that gives us a nice sort of base to work on. And then what we can do is start adding in those trees over the top of that. So just under here, this is all quite dark. I'm just going to fill in a little bit more charcoal. Bit more mark making. Okay, nice. How are you all doing with that?
Not as fast as you.
No, I thought that would be the problem.
You make it look very easy.
Right, let me do one tree, and then what I want to do is get the other picture up and do another layer on that. So this, let's do this nice tall tree up here. So I'm just first of all starting with the trunk, and I'm just going to darken up where the base is sitting on this bit of boulder. I've actually got two trees almost in alignment actually, so it's a bit odd. There are two different trees there. Right, so this one at the top, probably gone a little bit too thick with my mark there. What I want to do is give a little bit of a squiggly mark for the point of the tree. And once I've got that, it kind of sets the scene for what happens underneath. So you gradually get bigger, but you don't want to be too regular with your marks. So this tree has got a sort of quite a large gap in between this sticky out bit and this sticky out bit. And actually I want that one to go upwards a bit more. So variety is key, is the answer here. And also I'm doing a little twisty motion as I'm putting the branches in as well. So they all become a little bit random, not controlled. The more uncontrolled your mark, I find, the better it looks. But you've got to be brave. So you can think about how long and what direction you want those marks, but then go in and be a bit random with how you're pulling them out. So I'm literally just doing this, twisting, twisting, twisting with my finger as I draw. And that's what's making these lovely sorts of marks. So right up against the trunk, you might want to fill it in a little bit more, just as you come down and it gets thicker. Oh, simple as that. No, it takes a bit of practice, but be brave with your mark making. Try things out. And I mean, the technique I've got at the moment, I just sort of developed it over time, thinking about how do you get a random mark, but with enough control so that you want to have a branch go in a certain direction, you can do that, but without sort of making it too formulaic. You don't want to have all your branches looking the same. And it's also paying attention to the gaps within those branches. Gives the tree a bit of character. Okay, so I'm going to come back. We've got time to do a few more trees and marks to that one. But if we go back and look at drawing number 2, hopefully the fixative has dried. And what you can do is over the top of the dark areas, you can add another layer of charcoal. So where you want to go even darker, can you see that now I can work over the top of the fixed charcoal, add in another layer, and it goes so much more dark. It's lovely. So this is where you can build up and build up and build up. You don't have to stop at just 2 layers. You could fix it again after this layer and then put another layer of charcoal on. Fix it and then put another layer of charcoal on. See how dark you can go. And so if you want to really increase the range of tones that you can make, this is exactly what you need to do. You just fix it in between layers and add another layer. You can still blend in this second layer if you need to. So all the text that you used to put on the first layer of charcoal, you can still use to put on the second layer. If you do rub out something, you'll probably end up taking some of the first layer off as well. Although it's fixed, it's not permanent. It's just harder to move. Okay, so if you're using an art fixative, then you generally are left with a little bit of texture. It tends to grip, it tends to layer up a bit easier. If anyone is using hairspray to fix theirs, you may not have the same grip to it, but you should still be able to layer up a little bit more than just without any fixative at all. So it is something you need to experiment with, but if you're really wanting to get sort of the layered up effect, then you're going to be best off with a proper art fixatives, because it does sort of give that nice sort of grip. So you can work in over the top of the trunks. Think about some of these reflections going a bit darker. If you've darkened up this area of tree, background tree line, you might find that you want to fix that and then do another layer again afterwards of just these trees here, so that they stand forward from the background even more. Okay, but then you can see really dense black, a lot more powerful than it was with just the one layer. And hopefully that makes you go, oh, there's more I can do with charcoal than I thought. That was my plan anyway.
Pre-signed plan. Oh,
I think I always do that, actually.
That's good to hear. Okay, so if anyone wants to do another layer on that, feel free to sort of spray it again, let it dry again, and then layer up as much dark as you can possibly do. But I'll go back to this one. We are pretty much out of time anyway, but just sort of to finish off a few of the areas on here, we've got some sort of grass or moss or something on the top of these areas. Now, I don't want to leave them looking as bare as they are now, so I'm just going to create again a bit of texture. And although I want texture, I don't want it to be too prominent, so I'm just going to do a bit of texture and then dab over with my finger, which is half blending some of that texture together, but it's also making the tone spread out. So I get, rather than white paper, a light to mid grey. And then I can go back over the top of that and think, okay, I want a bit darker shape there, a bit of a darker shape there, and pull it in a bit more of that texture. So it's all sort of dotted and dashed and almost like a very loose scribbly dash. Again, it's finding the kind of mark that works for you, what you're trying to describe. You can do a bit of that mark making into the dark areas. And now that we've seen how you can layer up, if you wanted to, you could also do the same technique on this one, layering up with the fixative. As I come forwards, I can make this bit of boulder very slightly lighter than the one behind. So I'm increasing the tonal contrast between the dark areas and the lighter areas. You can also draw with the putty rubber. So there's a kind of bush or something sitting in this crevice. And so you might want to have a slightly different texture or mark going in here. Again, just think, where are the darker shapes? Where are the lighter shapes? Pinch the putty rubber into different shapes and see what you can do with that. Okay, and then this tree, again, it's sitting against dark either side. So I'm just going to use the putty rubber, hopefully. It's not pulling out as easily as I want it to, but there we go. We can get a bit of a negatively drawn side to the tree with the putty rubber. I can just go back into that actually and just darken up in between the branches. This side is darker than the other side, so I can do a little bit more scribble effect over there and just have a few areas pulled out. So it's given me an impression of a tree, and just have the trunk appearing and disappearing. So there's another little method, putty rubber tree. These distant ones, again, a very loose sort of twisty scribble might be enough just to hint at what's going on there. And then I'm just going to soften it back over top of it with my finger to make it look just a little bit more misty. So we don't want that to be too defined, too clear. We want the misty effect over here. And the less detail you put in these distant trees, the more distant they are going to look. So as you work your way forwards, you might want to start changing the amount of marks you make and how dark they look. So that pretty much brings us to the end of the time that we've got. Hopefully you've had fun getting a bit messy and experimenting with some different techniques. For finishing off this drawing, again, it's very much just focusing in on the marks that you're seeing, the tones that you're seeing, and getting a nice relationship. So you need to step back from it every so often and think, okay, where is the darkest parts, where are the mid tones, where are the light tones, and make sure that it's all working together to create a sense of depth. And here you can see the finished drawing, which I've continued through layering up, working from the back forwards, using darker charcoal at the front to bring out some of the more detailed and high contrast areas. I've also used a putty rubber to draw back into the lighter areas, putting in some lighter tree branches and some lighter rocks. I've used smudging and dusting some charcoal onto the surface to create more texture, especially in the water. And I've just adjusted the tones in the background to make the mountain even lighter, so that it fades into the background a lot more. So I hope you've enjoyed looking at using charcoal in a few different ways, layering charcoal far more extensively. You can see also my second drawing as the finished product. And if you've liked this drawing, please like and subscribe. And you can also check out my website www.milamarts.org for more classes and workshops, both online and in person. Keep drawing, and bye bye for now.